Good evening, everybody. Kamarie, thank you for coming along on this chilly and invigorating Invercargill evening to our candidates briefing session. I'm Michael Morris, I'm the Deputy Electoral Officer and Manager of Governance and Legal here at the City Council. And we'll be doing the basic introduction stuff and then handing over. Presenting tonight we have Claire Hadley, the Chief Executive of Invercargill City, Amy from the Southland Regional Council, had a statement to read from Chris on behalf of the Invercargill Licensing Trust, and then we have Anthony Morton, who is the Electoral Officer for Invercargill City, Southland Regional Council, Southland District Council, or District Council in case you were wondering. So, quick safety briefing. In the event of an emergency, sirens will sound and please follow the staff out of the building. We will be assembling out in the car park. Do follow the instructions of staff, and toilets, as I'm sure you're all aware, over by the stairs should you need them. So that is it from me at the moment, so without further ado, I'll invite Claire.
Thanks, Michael. And like you, I'll take my mask off while I'm speaking. Can I say how great it is to see a number of people here this evening in a range of ages, and I look forward to hearing from Michael that we've had a good number of nomination forms filed. So what's local government all about? First off, I should say that I am speaking on behalf of a territorial authority, your district council. Amy will cover off Environment Southland. From the Invercargill City's point of view, local government is a very complex business. The role of a councillor is not a full-time job, but it's not a hobby. There are more than 125 different pieces of legislation. We're responsible for formulating the district's strategic direction, and we do that in conjunction with the community through the long-term plan. We do advocacy to central government and to others on what our district needs. We determine the services and activities to be undertaken by the council as a result of feedback from the community. We are responsible for managing regulations. We're not always popular in this particular activity, upholding the law, and that includes formulating and enforcement of bylaws. We actually have a lawmaking power. We've got environmental management through the district plan, and we've certainly got the role of ensuring that local communities' voice is heard as part of decision-making processes of central government also. This is quite a lot that gets involved. Last week, I was speaking to a mayor of an authority that would be of not dissimilar size to ours, and his comment was that he thought he had the role of mayor down to about 25 hours a week. Very focused on where he can add value and what he's driving. I could speak to a mayor of another authority of a similar size or maybe smaller, and they would say they do 65 hours a week. It's the same for a councillor. But if it's not a hobby, what I would say is that it's a role that shouldn't be taken lightly. It's an important responsibility, particularly when you think about bylaws, but you think about the prudent use of ratepayers' money. You are representing and leading the district, and you're involved in advocacy and governance. I'm responsible for implementing council's decisions. So there is a real need for the councillors to sit and identify what is needed in the community, what action the council should take, what expenditure should be applied to it in a strategic sense, and then I'm responsible for implementing that through the approximately 400 people that work at Invercargill City. There is a skill set out in the candidate handbook that you will be able to pick up as you leave. What do I think that you might demonstrate if you're interested in standing for council? You're likely to have a genuine interest in a wide range of issues faced by local communities. You're likely to relate to a wide range of people and quite frankly have good people skills. You're probably going to get energy from engaging with people and finding out what makes them tick and what they think needs to happen in the local community. Able to use good listening skills, but also be able to have good public speaking skills. Two of the things, and I'll go absolutely off script, I think one of the hardest things for a councillor is not knowing who your 12 colleagues are going to be when you put your hand up if you're elected. Because if you go for a job interview, you get interviewed by one or two people that you get a sense of who they are, you can get a sense of the reputation of the people around you. You sit at a table and you have no voice other than that ability to debate, but you can't achieve anything unless you can get a majority vote. So you need to be able to articulate and debate to be able to influence others. And I think that's a challenge for people that you need to be able to appreciate that what's really important to you at that table might not be important to the others around the table. So you need to hear what's important to them and work with them on their issues in the expectation that they'll work with you on yours. The other thing that I would say that's quite difficult for candidates or for councillors is that they need to be able to defend their decisions when they're out at the supermarket, at the swimming pool, at the library, at the rugby field. And sometimes those decisions will have been made in public excluded and you're not able to share the greater amount of information that you had. But people will say, what did you do that for? And you'll find yourself having to defend how you voted on something, or indeed, you might not have voted for it, but the majority did. And you might have to articulate why the council came to the decision that it did the decision it made. So you're likely to be able to express your ideas clearly and be results focused, because we're there to make a difference. What are the results that you're looking for? You're going to get some complex issues, and it's my team's job to be able to put those in a report. You are going to read a lot. So anybody sitting at the council table, you are going to read a lot. So you're likely to be able to understand and analyse what's being told to you in a report, able to then ask questions of that report, and be able to, as part of a group, resolve some complex issues. All of us will find it more comfortable if you appreciate the difference between governance and management. One of my colleagues talks about councillors having noses in, fingers out. You're interested in the business, but you're not in the business. The staff are in the business, and I report to you on the activities of the staff. You're likely to think district-wide, you're likely to think city-wide, and for somewhere like Invercargill City, that's probably easier than somewhere like Southland District, which has a number of different communities. And the last thing that I would say is that you need to be willing to commit to the elected members' code of conduct, to that agreed behaviours for councillors that we have at Invercargill. What are the arrangements around council meetings? At the moment, and I say this because it changes with each council, they can choose their own layout, but at the moment council meetings are every 4 weeks. We have infrastructure committee meets on the first Tuesday of the month, performance policy and partnerships meets on the second Tuesday of the month, and council meets on the fourth Tuesday of the month. There's other subcommittees, working groups, and you can be invited into briefings on topics. You can see the 2022 meeting agenda, but you won't necessarily get to see the extraordinary meetings that have been held. We try not to call too many of those, and we certainly try and put them on a Tuesday afternoon on the back of another commitment that you may have had for a meeting. Flexible working hours, well, they don't come more flexible than a councillor's. You might get a phone call at 6 in the morning or at 10 at night, and you can work in the other things around of your life around it. What's the remuneration? It's shown there. Again, that is dependent upon the way in which the incoming council chooses to determine committees and determine the allocation of the pool of remuneration across the councillors. The mayoral remuneration is set by the Remuneration Authority. The rest is the subject of a pool established by the Remuneration Authority. And councillors must allocate all of that pool, but they look at what the workload is across the members of the pool. It's paid fortnightly. You are deemed to be an independent contractor. So although you are paid through the payroll of council, you are deemed to be an independent contractor. You're responsible for your own ACC levies, your own student loan repayments if you have them, and reporting to the IRD in terms of tax arrangements. I think that's about me, but I would say to you and anybody that you know that is interested in standing, I'm happy to meet with anyone at any time and answer any questions if they've got them, as I'm sure Michael is too. Okay? Amy, I think you're going to stand and I think we'll probably have questions at the end. Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Oh, it's nice to take it off. Well, kia ora koutou, everybody. I'm Amy Kubrick. I'm the General Manager Corporate for Environment Southland, Te Taotonga, which is Southland Regional Council. And I wanted to take the time this evening to talk to you a little bit about what the Regional Council does, because despite looking after the entire Southland region, it probably is one of the lesser known councils in terms of its activities. And people often don't understand why they have to pay two sets of rates. So the Regional Council is responsible for managing the environmental, the resource and the transport planning issues for our region. We've also got Harbour Master responsibilities, and we have a role in responding to climate change and community resilience to the opportunities and the threats that are presented by that. There's an enormous breadth to the work that we do. Claire talked about the number of pieces of legislation that govern our local government, and whilst I don't think we've got as many as the territorial authorities, we certainly have a significant number. And the most significant piece that we work with is the Resource Management Act. And basically that Act charges us with the integrated management of the natural and physical resources in the region. So we charge to do that, so there's a sustainable future for people who live in Southland now and people who are going to be living in Southland later on. And that future is not just for the people, but it's for the future of the environment itself. So ours is a very long-term view of what we do. The haora, the resilience of our region, its waterways, its coast, its land, the people and the flora and the fauna that exist here are at the heart of all that we do. So we have a significant regulatory role. We create the regional policy statement for the whole of the Southland region, including Rakiura, and this is the highest ranking local government planning document in the region, which directs our organisation and the other councils in the region on resource management issues and how we're supposed to address them. So as a regulator, part of our role is to develop the rules according to national direction from central government and in consultation with the community. And in addition to the legislation, we also have a whole bunch of national standards for things like air and water and Indigenous biodiversity. There are national policy statements, national operating frameworks, and we have to translate that direction from central government and incorporate that into our local plans, such as the proposed Southland Water and Land Plan and our regional air plan. But it's not a one-way street, so when there are changes to legislation or when there's new legislation being proposed, we also respond to that and we advocate to government on Southland's behalf in relation to those things that impact us as a region. Typically, we perform our regulatory role through policy and planning, through issuing consents for individuals and organisations to undertake activities which might impact on the environment and which aren't already covered by our plans. And we also perform monitoring and other work to ensure that our plans and consents are being complied with. But we are so much more than rules and regulations and rates. We're also concerned with soil conservation, water quantity and quality, air quality, biosecurity and biodiversity protection, marine and freshwater ecosystems, the avoidance and mitigation of natural hazards, which we have to identify and monitor, and we also undertake activities in the coastal marine space. We undertake environmental monitoring, we collect data about all the things that I've just talked about, and we turn it into meaningful information which we use to give effect to our work. The people that work for us are highly skilled, very educated, and they come from all around the world. And in addition to our policy and planning specialists, our consenting and compliance teams, we have people like scientists, biodiversity officers, river engineers, agricultural specialists, geographic information system specialists, which is a bit of a mouthful, just to name a few. And we're able to attract and retain quality people because the region that we support is dynamic, beautiful, challenging, varied, the work is interesting, and the nature of the work we do has inherent meaning as well. But we don't work alone. We value enormously our relationship with iwi and the partnership that we have there with them that gives effect to our role. So we work closely, as the other councils do, with Te Ao Marama, and they represent Ngāi Tahu ki Muri Hiku Tangata Whenua for resource management and local government. And so with iwi, we've been able to weave together a set of objectives representing community and iwi values for fresh water. We were the first, and we're still currently the only region in New Zealand that's been able to do that. We also have mana whenua representation on 2 of our council committees, and iwi are involved across our work programs as well. So notably, they are currently co-managing our People, Water and Land program, which is designed to give effect to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and Improved Water Quality here in Southland. We also work with our other councils, government agencies, industry and other local and national bodies in our work. And importantly, we work with our local communities when we're trying to affect change on the ground. Like our other councils, our work program priorities and budgets are laid out in our long-term plan, and I won't labour that because Claire's already talked about that. And our documents on our website if you would like to know more. So what does it mean to be a councillor for us? Well, firstly, we have 12 councillors and they cover 6 constituency areas within the region, and it's not a nice 2-person per constituency. It's quite varied. There are 6 for the Invercargill area and then varied amounts for the other areas. The chairman, deputy chairman and committee chairs are selected by councillors at the inaugural meeting of council following the election. We've got regular meetings of full council and committees and subcommittees of council, and they're currently held during the week, but as Claire said, you know, the new council sets its own committees and timetables, so that may change. So overall, and like the other councils, our councillors represent their communities for 3-year terms. They set policies, they make regulatory decisions, they review council performance. They approve our council's overall budget, and they set the rates. They set our strategic direction and our priorities, employ and monitor the performance of the chief executive, and they attend regular meetings. I think it's fair to say when you're a councillor, no 2 days are ever the same, so if you like variety, have we got the job for you? There's a lot to get your head around. As Claire said, there is a lot of reading. Some of the information that you deal with is quite complex, and we also run regular briefings for our councillors and a series of workshops to help them understand issues before they have to sit down and make decisions of them in full council. Those who like to get their gumboots or wear their gumboots from time to time occasionally get a chance to dress up and come into town and attend various meetings with partner agencies, other councils, industry bodies as required, as well as the regular council meetings. We throw in visits from the occasional government minister or representatives, And there's a sort of a pick and mix assortment really of community-based and information-based meetings and hooves as well. Those who aren't gumboot wearing do get a pair of gumboots to go out and undertake site visits to see what we're doing on the ground and to understand how we are making a difference out in the community firsthand. You get to talk to various parts of the community that our work affect and see how we're making a difference. And as councillors, you also get the opportunity to converse with your constituents and get involved in your constituents and your constituency on issues that are important to them. At our regular subcommittee and committee meetings and council meetings, you get to debate issues with your council colleagues, make decisions and shape policy. And if it's one thing just to pick up on the comment you made about one of the challenges that I see or one of the things that I think can be a challenge for councillors is knowing and understanding what hat you're wearing when. So often when you come to the council table, you are there to represent a particular point of view. And by all means, it's really important that we get those views out there, expressed and on the table. But your role as a councillor when you're making a decision is as a councillor and you're taking account of what everybody said and making a decision for the benefit of the region as a whole. And that can be tough sometimes as well. So, legacy is important. And I think one of the things that being a councillor gives you is that opportunity to help shape and create the future, whether that's for the city, whether it's for the district, or whether it's for the all of region. So if that's a way that you would like to make your mark, I would strongly encourage you to fill out that form and become a councillor. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Chris's statement over here. Chris Ramsey from the ILT, since his apologies, he did hope to be here, has not been able. So I'm sure a number of you know. The Licensing Trust is a community-owned organisation that serves the people of Invercargill. It owns and operates 24 successful hospitality businesses. That will soon be 29 once with the Langlands Hotel opening in the coming months. The businesses range from accommodation and pubs to bottle stores and distribution. The ILT's model is a unique form of social enterprise that has all of its diverse parts contributing a share of its profits back to the community. Joining the ILT board presents a rare opportunity to play an active role in helping direct funding to the community to ensure it has a long-lasting positive impact on Invercargill and its people. Since its inception in 1944, ILT has given over $200 million back to the community of Invercargill through grants and donations. It is administered under the provisions of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012, in case you were wondering. And its mandates include establish motel accommodation, operate licensed premises in the interest of public wellbeing, establish model accommodation, not motels, distribute the profits for the community purposes. They have two board meetings per month, and these are typically held on the last 2 Thursdays of each month, starting at 4 and last for approximately 2 hours. And I'm sure Chris, like Claire and myself, and Amy and the team at the Regional Council, as well as Robin, who is here from SDC, if anyone's interested in finding out more, just make contact. We're happy to help. And with that, we will now hand over to what is billed as the main event. That's Anthony, our electoral officer.
All right, introduction. Well, kia ora koutou, everyone. I'm Anthony Morton, as Mike was explained. I'm the electoral officer for Invercargill City this time around. Also electoral officer for the Regional Council, the Southland District Council, and the District Council, so we've sort of got the province covered. So I'm here to try and cover off for you as candidates more of what you can expect to go through on a candidacy basis if you're looking to stand for council. In principle, what you need to do on the nomination front, cover off some technical bits like what you need to do with your candidate profile and photo, if you're going to submit one, things like campaigning and get into that mode, and what the rules around that are, and then finally look at some of the results stuff. So that's the priorities of what we want to try and cover off in the next 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end of it, so if anybody's got any queries coming out of that, we can cover those off. So this is a ICC hosted event, so most of the slides you're going to see are going to be directed at ICC, but as you've seen from coverage from Amy and the statement from Chris, delivered by Michael, we're trying to be more of a global, bring in more of a global aspect or a provincial aspect into the election process this time, which is why the other speakers have had an opportunity to address this. I'll try and cover those off if anybody's specifically interested in those other nomination processes as we go through those various slides. So I just wanted to start with some background information. So I'm employed by elections.com, and that's a little bit about the company that employs me. So I'm an electoral administrator, if you want to know, during the daytime. And we are based in Christchurch. We do about 200 elections on a typical year. Some of them are very small. They could be just the local Chamber of Commerce elections. Some of them are quite big. So at the moment we're doing an election process for the Cooperative Bank, which is over 120,000 members. And then we get across the various other cooperatives like Fonterra, like Ravensdown, those sort of farm industry groups. We also do a lot of iwi ratification polls and those sort of things. So that's what we're doing through the process. But every 3 years we get involved in council elections. And you can see from the range there, those are the councils that we have been engaged by to process either just their voting papers or, in this case, for both Southland, Invercargill and Gore to carry out their electoral officer functions. And through that we pick up the licence interest as well. So that's a little bit of background information about that company and where I sit. As electoral officer, I'm that person responsible for the conduct of the election. So if there's final decisions to be made, they rest with me. I'm not responsible to the council, even though they engage us, but we work with those councils on an administrative basis through the likes of Michael and the team, and we are trying to provide a level playing field with some reasonably light legislation. A bit down the bottom of the slide there about we don't monitor campaigning activities amongst the candidates. So if the candidates are having a squabble, we're not interested in that. You have to grow a thicker skin and put up with somebody calling you a public. We deal with the breaches of the legislation, and usually that comes down to signage placements, mundane stuff like that, and breaches of declarations and things further down the track. We'll cover that off for the presentation. So for this particular election, Michael is the Deputy Electoral Officer, so he's the man on the ground in Invercargill here. I'm based in Christchurch and I support him through that process. Michael will hand out or organise the documentation and will organise the team to process the nominations and that sort of thing. On the ILT side, Chris Ramsey, who's not here tonight, but he's offering assistance, and Jan Brown, who's the Environment Southland Deputy EO, so helps out with the queries on behalf of the administration of their nomination processes. So that's the timetable up there. It's the abbreviated timetable. I'm not going to go through all those dates, but the ones I do want to point out is the first one. So this 8th of July date there, which is the election period starts, is the period 3 months out from the actual voting closing date. And that just signifies when candidates need to start tracking their expenditure. And we'll cover that off a little bit further in the presentation, but that's a reasonably important date for me to just note. Obviously the nominations don't open until the 15th of July, but and close on the 12th of August. You've got about 4 weeks. And the last one that you're probably more interested in is when the results come in, which is this year, 8th of October, there was some initial results out there. So the rest of those we'll cover off in more detail through the presentation. It's just to get your head around that, those key dates. So let's have a look at this nomination process itself. So those are the positions up for grabs for Invercargill City electeds, if you like. So Mayor, 12 councillors in this case for Invercargill City, 5 members for the Community Board in Bluff, and as Amy pointed out, there's 6 members for the Invercargill Rakarua constituency and Invercargill Licensing Trust for most of the electors in Invercargill City. Just to note that that area doesn't cover the full Invercargill City area. So the nomination process, so what we want to make or point out to you here is that for you to get your name on the voting document, you need to firstly submit a nomination form. And if you've been through that process in 2019, take a bit of a relief in that the whole process is very similar this time around. Okay, so the paperwork side of it shouldn't change much. But you do need to submit a nomination form, and you do need to pay a $200 deposit for every position you want to stand for. The evidence of New Zealand citizenship is required just to prove that you are a citizen, because that's one of the conditions of eligibility. And the profile, candidate profile and the photo are optional, but most candidates choose to put them in. And we'll go through the technicalities of those for the presentation. So the forms are available in this case for Invercargill City from the Invercargill City offices here in Bluff, and from the website. So the handbook is up there now. The nomination forms will be on the website probably Friday, maybe? Yeah, certainly by the end of the month.
Not this Friday.
No, by Friday.
By Friday, yes.
By Friday.
Or maybe early next week.
I think we'll go with that.
Okay. Now, and you see there's a selection hub office noted there. That's conditional on it being available to the occupied, I think, is it?
Yes.
There will be a hub office.
Yes.
Be hub office.
There will, and Anthony, you want to touch on Weber Hacker, or do you want me to?
Yeah, if you want to.
You go for it, get over the
Well, the Vote Murahaka is the initiative to do to broaden it. I might pass to Michael on that one.
Right. So Vote Murahaka is the initiative of all 4 councils in the Southland region to come together to provide a seamless ability for all people to vote. And the idea is that there will be a central hub here and in Gore, where people can come and vote. So it doesn't matter if you're from Southland District, you're from town, or come into town for the day and you want to do a special vote, you will be able to do that in Invercargill. And if you're in town, you should be able to do a vote for Invercargill City there quite nicely. So the hub we're still working on. It will be something that we will announce on our website and Facebook and media once it's available. But we're very pleased with this initiative and very happy that we're able to work together with all of our councils on this, and it's under the label of Vote Murahaka. You will see the little whale tail on the front page of the candidate's handbook. That's the logo to know that you're looking at elections in Southland.
So the hub office will be available for receive nominations as well?
Potentially, but we'll advertise that once and when that can happen.
Yeah, so that's yet to be confirmed, but so the hope that it will be. But certainly the forms are available from, in this case, Invercargill Council's offices or website. And the same applies for Southland District and Environment Southland. So if you're looking for those documents, go to the respective councils. They'll be available there either on the website or in hard copy at the offices themselves. But just keep in mind we need to return them if you're looking to be a candidate, because they're not necessarily to go back to that same point of collection. So for Invercargill City, they're going to go through to the Invercargill City offices. Same with the ILT, so they're going to go through to the Invercargill City. The Southland Districts will go through to Southland Districts. Environment Southland will come back through to Southland Districts 4th Street office. Correct, Rob? Yeah. So those details are on the nomination form as to where you return them anyway, but it's just worth making that point here. And those other items there about you have to pay a deposit, but you can pay it online if you need to. But also to be aware that your candidate contact details are generally made public after the event by way of a spreadsheet of contact details. So like the newspaper or members of the public, salespeople wanting to send you some advertising space will have the ability to come back and contact you.
That might be the
No, but it's up to you as to whether you want that withheld. So address isn't typically it, it's usually just phone number and or email.
But the law's changing in relation to the residential address.
That's just
That's
what it's
just authorisation.
That's
Ah.
just
So we'll come to that. So just be aware that your details will be made or will be released after nominations unless you ask for them to be suppressed. But there is a requirement to have at least one form of contact there for you. Yep, okay, so these are your eligibility criteria. The first stuff is pretty much straightforward. I think in terms of general points, for councils, you don't have to live in the area if you are a candidate, but your two nominators have to live in the area and be enrolled in that area. So if you're looking to stand for instance, the community board, you know, Bluff, your two nominators have to be enrolled within that area and have the ability to vote in that community board area. So you can stand for council, mayor and community board if you want to for ICC, if you choose to, but that's 3 lots of $200 if that's going to be the case. You can stand on the ILT and council if you want to, and you must state on the nomination form whether you live or don't live within the area that you are standing for, and that comes out of the wash and the little canon booklets that go out with the voting documents. We'll show you how that fits together in due course. The other big thing there is you can't withdraw after nominations close. So if you are thinking of withdrawing, please make that known to us before nominations close. Otherwise you'll be like the TV presenter I had last year in 2019 who did it as a promotional tour from the Southland District Council and with the intention of withdrawing but never got around to it, and so he has to remain in the race. Much to his bosses discuss.
Anthony, cannot have interest in a contract over 25k a year. You need OAG approval, or Office of the Auditor General. Will you get that before nominations close?
No, well, sometimes it can, but typically that process is a post nomination close process.
I just want to make it clear to people because we do have councillors across the country that have business with the councils, and so you've got the cannot, but actually they can stand as long as they get the OAG approval first. Yeah, thank you.
All right. That, if you haven't seen it before, that's a typical nomination form, and we're not going to give you great detail on it, other than to just point out that there's a 2-page item. The front page covers, and the top part of the front page covers the candidate details, so that's where you're listing the details if you're the one that's standing. The bottom part below that is for your nominators to complete. The back page has eligibility criteria in the top part, and below that, we'll have a little bit more detail, but below that there's some information about the bank account to pay your deposit to, if that's how you want to do it, if you want to pay it online. And below that is a little block there for you to submit your own bank account details so that if you are eligible for your deposit at the end of the voting process, that's where it's going to go back to. So that part of it doesn't get disclosed as public information. That's just for our administrative purposes. And we'll just go back to the other nomination form. So just to point out a few things on that front page of the nomination form. So up the top, and you might have to squint, there's a couple of little radio circles there about whether they live within the area or outside the area. So that's where you just check. You might live in Dunedin for all intents and purposes and want to be standing for a position down here, that's allowed. But if you do, you need to note there that you live outside the area. And below the, if I can just show you there, in here there's several other little boxes here, one of which is, I wish my name to be shown on the voting document as. So that's an important field to look for. If you're known as Tom Brady, let's say, but your full name is Thomas Edward Brian Brady or something, You may have submitted your full name up the top there so we can check you off on the electoral roll. But unless you complete that and say you want to be listed as Tom Brady, you will be listed as Thomas Edward Brian Brady on the voting document, which when everybody else is just doing an abbreviated version, usually just first name, that stands out. People go, well, why have you listed my whole name? It's because you haven't specified there how you actually want to be listed on the voting document as. So just keep that in mind. And the rest of that, I think, will be reasonably straightforward. As I say, it should be more or less the same form we did last year, or 2019, that we still before. So should be reasonably familiar. All right. Let's have a look at this candidate profile side of things and the photos. So they're not compulsory. You don't have to submit one, but most candidates do. It's pretty miserable in terms of the number of words you get to talk about yourself. 150 words gets chewed up pretty quick. What we'd say about that is, and I'll show you the next slide, where one of the next slides will show how these fit together, but what I'd encourage you to do is don't waste your time by putting your opening sentence, my name is, because your name will be listed above your photo, and it'll be reasonably obvious who you are, so there's a few words saved at least. But you can't comment on your own, you need to comment on, keep your commentary to your particular policies, your whatever you want to project. Don't go working on other candidates' policies. And again, they need to go up on the council, well, they will go up on the council website after nominations close, so that people can see who they're going to be voting for, or the voting documents to be delivered. We do want an electronic version of your nomination, that candidate profile, please. So either email a copy of it or bring it in on a memory stick or a flash drive or whatever it's going to be, and hand it over with your nomination form if you're coming in. Preferably email probably is preferred.
Easiest.
But we make everything work. Yeah. And the logic of that is that we want your document the way you finished it. We don't want to have to pick it up and retype it, and in that process make mistakes that you'll only see when you open the voting document. So if you can give us what you have submitted, we can then just copy and paste that and everybody's happy. And the point to note from that is that ideally it comes as either a Word document, or if it's a PDF, then you've got to be able to copy the content out of the PDF. So don't print it off, then scan it and email that through, because that's as good as a hard copy. Alright, so that's the profile side of it. The photos, they need to be recent, as in the last 12 months. And don't get too worried about how big the photo is or the context of it, shall we say. We will crop it accordingly as best we can, but if you're going to do your own photo, we'd encourage you to take it up against a light background, so not a window or something like that, and to just be conscious of the lighting that's there's not a great shadow across your face or something like that. So things like no sunglasses, no hats, some sort of clear photo that people will have a reasonable chance of recognising you with, and make sure it's on your own, please. So not the photo that you trip appeals on the trip trip to Melbourne or wherever it was. So we need to be able to just identify you clearly. And this is how they fit together. So in the handbook, in this case, this is just a mocked up one, but this is my colleague working that. So you can see that in there it's listed under Invercargill City Council. These are the mayoral candidates. It then lists his name. Below that is the affiliation that he wants to use, and he's put a wee bit of thought into that. Below that is a statement saying whether he lives in or outside the area. And in this case, he's told a lie and said he lives he resides in the area, but he actually doesn't. And he's also standing in this case for the council. So he's standing for mayor plus the council. And that is 150 word profile would follow that. So you can see there that it's quite clearly labelled who he is. You don't need that. My name is your opening line. All right, and his photo is. Oh, yes, it is what it is. So those are the things you need to get the nomination form in. Completed nomination, and that'll be checked. The deposit, the profile if you're having one, and the photo and evidence of your citizenship. All right, on to the bit of campaigning side of things. So you can kick off your campaigning anytime you like. You could have been campaigning last year if you want to, but there's a few things that you need to just keep in mind. The principal message is you need to stick to your own resources. So if you don't own the item you're trying to use in your campaign, or you haven't got permission to use it, you probably shouldn't. And that generally goes more for the council resources. So council logos, ILT logos, those sort of things, keep away from them. Likewise, use of council buildings and council staff to support your application. Don't use that. They're council resources. As candidates, you generally shouldn't be trying to pick up voting papers for electors. It's simply because of the perception that gives that you could then interfere with that process. So leave that alone. They have got a reply paid envelope, or if they can't get there, then they should get somebody else to get it into the council ballot box. As a general rule, we try and tell candidates to keep away from that. In this case, in Invercargill's case, they've got a specific policy about not campaigning on council premises. And I think that extends to signage. We cover that off, that you can't have a sign that's visible within or from the council building or something to that effect. Yeah, so all that information is documented in the handbook in a bit more detail. But as I noted there earlier, if you are a candidate, you need to submit a declaration at the end of the voting process outlining your expenses that you've incurred on the campaigning side of things. Now, you may not have any expenses, you may take no campaigning or do it very cheaply. You still need to submit a return at the end of the voting process. And as Claire indicated before, any campaign material has to have an authorisation statement on it, which at the moment, because the law is still the old law, requires you to state that it's authorised by either you as a candidate or your agent, and then list either your address or your candidate's address. And it needs to be a physical address, it can't be a PO box or an RD number or something like that. Now, from July, that legislation should change, and the second part of that will change to allow you to not list an address, a physical address. You'll be allowed to list mobile phone numbers, email addresses, or website addresses where somebody can view that, where that particular agent or candidate can be found. We encourage you, if you're putting it on signs, etc., in particular, to make sure that that authorisation statement is on the front of the sign so it stops everybody jumping to false accusations that you haven't got an authorisation statement on there somewhere. Any campaign material must be factual, so it's all still subject to the advertising standards. So, as such, that can be complained to, or the public can submit complaints to the Advertising Standards Association, and they will conduct hearings if need be about the validity of your campaign material. So, you can, if you're stating facts, make sure your facts are correct, basically. So you can't go running off stupid figures about the council spending or bring the rates up 20%. In fact, they haven't. And that last point is the usual rules of defamation apply. So just be careful with your campaign stuff. Those are the limits that you can spend on your campaign. Now, in most cases, they're the same. So these are population based, if you're wondering. And if you are standing for multiple issues, it's the highest level that holds and carries. So if you extend it for both the Bluff Community Board and the council, you can still only spend $30,000. And what we need to point out is that is the candidates' money, basically. So usually it's self-funded. Occasionally it comes from donations, and we'll cover that off shortly. But just to confirm that there is no magical cheque or money coming out of the council to cover your campaign expenses. We do get that, where people will get to the end of the campaign period and say, right, well, when do I get my money? And it's sad to point out that that's not the case. Okay, so if you are conducting campaigning, it's typically your money or money from donations, if you're lucky enough to get that, and it can only be up to that level. And you need to submit a declaration at the end of the period to say, this is where I spent my money on. If you didn't spend any money, you just still need to submit a nil declaration. Okay. So we've covered off some of that. Let's refer to pages 21 and 34 of the handbook. There's a bit more detail in there. It needs to be any campaign costs that have been incurred from the 8th of July, at least. If you've done something prior to the 8th of July that has a value that goes into the election period, then you have to prorata that cost. So more particularly for some of, say, the bigger urban areas where they've started campaigning months ago, they may have got a photo shoot or something like that done for some of their publicity material. And that cost will have happened in February, but they need to prorata that cost into, or bring some of that cost into their election declaration, expense declaration. So just because it happened before the 8th of July doesn't mean you can't really forget about it. Some of that has to be carried across. We need to put those declarations up on the website, so they're a document of public inspection. So you do need to be careful about what you put in there, because the public will be looking at it. And somebody will use that as an opportunity to question how you conducted your campaign. There's the thing about the deposit. So each nomination has to be supported by a $200 deposit. And it is a deposit, but you only get the deposit back if you poll a certain level of votes. And the trigger is if you get more than 25% of the lowest polling successful candidate. So in Invercargill City's case, whoever's the 11th polling candidate, 12th polling candidate, that's the trigger point. So you then need to get 25%, at least 25% of whatever that is. Obviously, if you get elected, you get your nomination back anyway. But if you're not in that happy point of being elected, then that's where how that 25%. And we don't refund those deposits until we get your declaration. It's nothing personal, that's just what the law says. So donations, now these are more rare, more typical for some of the bigger urban areas that have political parties organised and handle some of this stuff for them. But unlike the expense side of things, there's no time limit on donations. So if you received a donation last year, you need to declare it if it's over a certain level. This is the $1,500 level. That's the mandatory level that you have to declare above. What we recommend is that you put any donations in one declaration, just for transparency, so that anyone questioning you further down the track can have some confidence. That's what you do. You have to reach that point yourself as to whether you want to do that or not, because you are the one that submits the declaration, but it has to be at least donations over $1,500. There's rules around anonymous donations. So in the old days, there were lots of anonymous donations, and so when people said they got an anonymous donation, they didn't list them, or they just listed them as anonymous. But nowadays, they're very tight, and unless somebody drops a bag of money off on your doorstep, which is highly unlikely, you can generally work out who that donation came from, and if you can do that, then that has to be declared if it's over that $1,500 trigger level. who the donor was or who the contributors to that donation were if it was made up by a series of people. So it gets a little bit tricky. Again, have a look in the handbook. Most of you won't be affected by the donation side of things, but if you are, have a look at the handbook. If it doesn't make sense, pick up the phone and we'll see if we can help you out. But at the end of the day, each candidate has to make this declaration and they're available for public inspection. I think that's probably about that side of it. Signage, Michael might be more of an expert on this than me because this is more specific to Invercargill City.
Yeah. Thank you. So with the election signs, under our district plan, we have to apply for a resource consent to put up election signs during the campaign period. You'll be pleased to know we don't expect you to apply for a resource consent to do that. I have done that on behalf of all candidates. It should be granted very shortly, so I promised. And it will allow all signs to be put up from the end of the nomination period, so Friday the 12th of August, your signs can go up. The resource consent will be on the website and I'm happy to make it available to anybody who would like a copy. But what it will require is that your signs can pretty much go anywhere in the city. The rule is that if you're putting it on somebody's property other than your own, you must have their permission, and we can ask for that to be shown if we've received a complaint. You can't put it on council property, so that's all our parks and reserves. That does include our road reserves, so you need to make sure your signs are tucked onto a fence or behind a fence. Part of that is just to protect the assets underneath, so we don't want you to put your boarding sign into the middle of an electric pipeline. It's kind of obvious and a bit of self-preservation. With that, there are a number of rules that our roading team have around where it can be placed at intersections, because we all know everybody likes putting their signs at the big T intersections, think of Yarrow and Queen's Drive. You cannot put it within 9 metres of an intersection, so that's measured from the curb, and that includes, if it's a T intersection, so you take your curbs on the bottom of your T, they go straight up and then it's 9 metres from there, so the whole middle piece is out as well. Don't worry, the team don't expect you to immediately take something down if there's a problem. They will contact you and ask you to move it, but we will expect you to move it. And that includes if you would like to do some trailer advertising, that's included as well, but you will require a separate permission form to do that. That will be on our website that goes through our roading team. And the final part on that is Waka Kotahi, so State Highway 1 and 6, and 98 and 99 on the edge of town. You need permission from Waka Kotahi NZTA to put signs up on the State Highway network. Again, there's information available on that in the handbook and will be on our website as well. Covered all of that. And just in terms of sign rating, so vehicle sign rating, it's okay, you can do that. It is covered in your campaign expenses, but the costs of running your car during the campaign aren't considered a campaign cost, just the sign rating is. There are a number of rules around where you can park your car, so again, it can't be visible from our CRB, so don't think that it's a good idea to be parking it in S Street 1 car park, for example. The exception to this rule is our councillors, when they're on council business, they have specific council car parks that they will park in when they're at the council building, only for council business. They have very strict instructions about that and know that we will ask and require them to move their vehicles if they're anywhere else or if they're not in our building for council purposes, i.e. council meetings during these last few periods from when signage is allowed. So I think that is probably about it for me, other than if you've got a complaint, candidates do complain about other candidate signs, members of the public complain about candidate signs. They come into the customer and environment team. They are responsible for that administration. Our friendly compliance team will have a chat with you first and ask you to move it. If you don't move it, then they are authorised to remove it, but we do prefer not to have to do that because we don't want to damage your sign, because we do mention they do cost a bit of money. But no, it's not Anthony or my job to monitor that, but you need to contact the council and they will take care of that. So I think Anthony will now take you through a bit more of the technical nature of sites. Yes, quickly.
If you had an item of clothing and, let's say, for example, had my beautiful face on it, and I was selling it, does that count as an infringement, or is it only if it's given away? So it states in the election offences, lower value items such as penny flyers should not be given away as part of a campaign. But if people are buying, does that count, or?
Yeah, you can sell your order care. You need to be careful how much you sell it for.
Because that would come into a campaign cost. Yes. So,
Firstly, the cost of producing them is a campaign expense that you will need to declare. And then as you sell that, that could be a potentially a donation depending on how much you sell it for. Okay? So, but unlikely that it's going to be that sort of level that's going to trip that $1,500 mark. But that's something to be aware of. But you certainly can't give them away because that's treated as deemed to be treating, which will go off. Just a couple of more things on the side before we click off there. So that date for starting is for ICC because that's ICC's signage rules. There will be different rules for Southland District and different again probably for Gore District. So it's relevant to the area that you are placing your signage in, what those rules are. So this is for ICC, this stuff here. And the other point I want to point out is that authorisation statement needs to be on there. Authorised by the candidate or their agent, and up until this new legislation comes in, it has to be the physical address of that candidate or agent. After the new legislation comes in, it can be slightly different for that second part of it, but it still needs that authorisation statement there. Yeah. Right, one of the other points on that previous slide was you can't include a copy of a voting document or something that symbolises a voting document or how somebody should vote. So here's a couple of examples of good and bad signs. So the good one is just a stylisation of a tick for that particular candidate. And it's got its authorisation statement in one word, which is currently in the old format. The one on the right is not good because he's indicating who to vote for with other candidate names, and the rest of it is the same. So it's really just the fact that it's trying to symbolise more than just his name. And that one there could be an example of somebody that's been a bit too honest. That one wasn't actually a candidate, as it turned out. He was indicating that he was going to stand, but withdrew. So they asked him to take his side stand. Social media. Social media is really just a different way of broadcasting your campaigning message. So the same rules apply. In this case, keep away from council's resource, which is council's social media channels. And they will have their own policy about how they will regulate that. So in this case, they unlike candidates and they will delete anything they see as campaigning related in the way of posts, etc. So that's council's resource. On your resource, your social media channels, you should have your authorisation statement on there somewhere, saying that this page is authorised by yourself. Here's my contact details if you want to know them. And what else is there? It's pretty much that same thing, that same principle. Keep away from council's resource, use your own resource, stick to your own messaging, and the same principle applies. Election offences, Stevie raised that before, so that treating is the situation there where you can't induce people to vote for you. Come and have a free beer on me so long as you vote for me, that sort of thing. You can run a campaign meeting and you can offer tea and biscuits afterwards, but it's just tea and biscuits. Keep away from the alcohol. Can't give away t-shirts or items of value is what the legislation says, but that's generally the things that people trip themselves up on. They'll go and print off t-shirts or bags or pens or something and hand them out, and then we have to tell them that that's not allowed and they can dump their supply of those items. What else is it? Unauthorised adverts is, yeah, so it's really just anything that we pick up in the way of offences that we receive an official complaint about, they get passed on to the police. So it's the police that actually carry out any prosecutions that get further down the track. All right, so let's have a look at the process itself, the voting process and the results side of things, because that's what most of you will be interested in. So this will stop the tour of this. Electoral rolls, if you want an electoral roll, we can't give you a soft copy, unfortunately, because the legislation doesn't allow it. You have to buy a hard copy. If you want that, it's going to cost $100. There are two flavours of the electoral roll. So there's one about to hit the decks early July, mid-July, when the nominations open, and that's the one that we use for the nomination checking. And then the final one is produced in or after August, the roll closes. The roll itself comes out in September to mid-September. That's the one they use for issuing the voting documents. Again, you can buy a hard copy if you want, but it's going to cost you $100, unfortunately. Special voting, you as candidates may get approached from people saying, I never got a voting document, I want to vote for you, how do I do that? Encourage them to go to the council, the local council office, and they will issue the special voting document. So don't involve yourself in that process, because again, that's this influence factor comes into it. But certainly encourage them to go and pick up a special vote or ring up the council if enough time is still in the process, they can mail it out to them. The election hub office will probably be up and running by then, and there'll be special voting available from that for various councils if need be. So anybody coming in from Southland District or Gore for that matter should be able to pick up a voting document here in town.
So both as well.
Yes. All right. So that special voting period just runs in conjunction to the ordinary voting period. So it's just allowing anybody that didn't receive a voting document to have a mechanism to get something, or if a dog's eaten their original mail or something.
That actually go.
Yes. Oddly enough, one of the biggest vandals is snails.
Snails are mean.
Snails love voting documents. So particularly in the rural areas, they leave them in letterboxes for a couple of days, and the snails love them. Anyway, if they need a replacement, that's a special voting process for that. So the results, this is probably what most of you are interested in. So the results will be out initially as a progress result, which is cranked out virtually straight after voting closes at midday on the 8th of October. That'll be probably 2 p.m. or thereabouts before you see it as candidates. So there's a bit of a reconciliation process that we go through to sort that out. And then the council staff, Michael will potentially be ringing the successful candidates. I'm not sure whether you ring all the candidates, but we do. Providing you
Between the team, you do.
yeah. And then they will go up on the website and be emailed to candidates from there. And then there's several, well, it's 2 other iterations of the result. One is a preliminary result, which is just when all the ordinary votes have been tallied up. So that progress result won't cover the ones that have been dropped off to the council office that morning, for instance. The preliminary result will. The final result will be several days later, so that takes into account all the special votes that have been processed. There's a much more involved verification process for those ones, which is why it takes longer. So those documents, or those result documents, will all be put up on the website as soon as they're available and available to the candidates. Coming into office, that doesn't happen until the day after the results are declared. Now, up until last election, that was the date after it hit the public notice in the newspaper. Legislation has now been changed to allow that now to happen when it's posted to the council website. So it just means that technically the successful candidates come up a little bit earlier. They can't actually do anything until they're sworn in. And there's a separate process for that, so the council staff will be involved with successful candidates and Brad would like to have that official ceremony. Yeah, so let's just work through. some resources there other than the Canada Handbook is obviously the main principal resource. Local Government New Zealand have a making a stand booklet available. If you want to source that, there's some contact website information on the inside cover, I think it's of the handbook itself. And the council will put out this pre-election report next month, or August.
Should be
Next month, which will list the major projects that have got underway over the next 3 years, is it? Yeah. And it's really just a guide for candidates to be aware of what's in the pipeline, basically, what's already been committed. And then, of course, if you really want to get excited, you can go look at online legislation, which is the Local Electoral Act and the Local Electoral Regulations.
They're very exciting.
Yes.
If you're wondering.
Yes.
But the other place you could go is to the Vote Marahaku page,
Yes.
where there are a series of videos and interviews with current elected members about the experience of being an elected.
Yes.
All right.
Southland.
Last words. Just in case any of you were hoping there was going to be online voting, there still isn't. So it's
Oh, that call, sorry.
no, can't get that one off the ground. But do want to emphasise about getting your nominations in early. You can't be a candidate unless you get your nomination in on time. That's the next one to close off. So there's no prizes for being the last candidate to submit their nomination, but it's certainly costly if you're too late to get that in. So don't leave it to the last minute. Stick to your own promotions, and basically everything will take care of itself. I do want to just open it up for questions, and if anybody's got any questions about the process from there.
What would happen if you were gloriously popular, you got voted into lots of different councils all over the country?
Yeah.
Would you be allowed to represent them all?
If you got voted and you could get there, yes you can. It's been tried before, but it becomes a resourcing issue as to how you would make it happen.
There is the travel expenses are your own.
Yes. Highly unlikely these days, but technically it's possible. Yes.
As long as they're not territorial and original.
Yes, that's right. So you can stand for other positions, you can't stand for the same, so you can't stand for a territorial authority within a regional council area. So you can't stand for Invercargill City and Southland Regional Council, but you could stand for Otago Regional Council if you wanted to. But you need people from those enrolled in those areas to support the nomination in the first place.
I want to apologise for the simplicity of this question because I'm very new to this whole process. Who is the agent you keep talking about?
Some candidates will have an agent. So rather than declaring themselves as the candidate being responsible for this candidacy,
Ah,
so it could be a solicitor, it could be an accountant, it could be a friend.
But it doesn't have to be anyone.
You don't have to have one.
Most people don't have agents,
okay.
but some people that didn't want to disclose their home addresses under the old legislation engaged an agent to get around that. So the expectation was that if they did that, then they had to disclose where that agent lived or where they could contact that agent so they could talk to the candidate in some way.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Claire. New incoming councillors, what's the biggest sort of challenge or thing to get their head around that they might not have expected or even known about usually?
Do you know, I think I'd probably say we've got 2 councillors here and I'm not aware that we've got any others. I'd throw that question to them because I think that's the experience factor that comes in. And while they're thinking about it, I would go back to that Vote Marahaku that I promoted before. We ran 3 separate occasions on Facebook Live with a total of 8 elected members, some who are still in office, some who have retired from office, and they talked about their own experience and they answered questions that people asked, and those are available on the
on the Facebook page that we've got for Waitemara Haku, and I really encourage you to go and listen to that because there's some really good pearls of wisdom in there. But Alex or Bex, do you have things you'd say? What did you not expect?
I think the sheer amount of reading was not something that I expected, but also the range of things that you have to be across or have at least develop a level of understanding of, because it's not just about the things that you care about. So there's certain reasons why I wanted to be on council, and those are the things that I was passionate about and cared about, but there's a whole bunch of other things that I'm not so interested in that I have to be interested in because it's part of the job.
For me, I think it was more that I ran a really long campaign, but I've still sort of had a bit of a shine on me that I could get in and just change everything, or like that you could just, you'd get in and you'd shake things up, and that, there's young, fresh energy and that kind of thing. But when I got in, really only one or two faces changed. So it was the same as we had over a series of years. So getting in and shaking things up literally is impossible. You've got to really play the long game, work with people, learn how to work with people, learn how all the, like Nick said, all the different mechanics of it work together and how they fit together. The breadth of things that you have to be across is just incredible. But yeah, people, learning the people, not only that, but the officers that you're working with and the politicians that you're working with, to actually eventually affect change, because it's going to take a while to get your feet under the desk. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. The other thing I'd say is you'll never be able to go to the supermarket in 2 minutes again.
No.
Okay? And if you've got kids, young kids, they're going to say, "No, Debbie, please don't, Daddy." At some stage when you go to the supermarket, they're just going to say, "Keep walking."
You do that now anyway.
Anybody else do anything?
Yeah, one sort of follow on. Obviously, looking from the outside in, seeing like City Council here has been slightly dysfunctional. Do you think there's a real challenge with, I guess, councils being elected and having no governance experience?
What I would say is that there's an amazing array of professional development opportunities to be a councillor. We run some in-house, Local Government New Zealand organises them and sends people down here to do training for all territorial authorities, things like that. I think that, like any group, changing one or two members changes the composition of the group, and what really counts is being willing to listen to others and having an open mind about working with others. There is as part of your oath, it's about having an open mind, that you come into the council chamber not having decided your position, but actually being prepared to listen to the views around the table. You're likely to have done a bit of reading, a bit of thinking, a bit of talking about the topic, but making sure that you're coming in prepared to listen. And look, I'd say that, how do I say this? That many councils around the country have struggled at times with some of the composition of the council. And one that was particularly public was, I think it was 2 terms ago, or where Horowhenua had a mayor. Last term, where Horowhenua had a mayor, and he had particular views about what he was going to do, and he couldn't achieve those because even though he was the mayor, he kept finding that his council acted as a block because they worked out the power of the numbers. Decisions are only made at the council table. Outside the council table, you have no other powers. Your superpowers only exist at the council table. The mayor has a few powers, but not many. And so it's all about the power of a majority. And that's where it comes back to being able to work with others. And that's the thing that I think does surprise people when they first come in. You sometimes hear about people standing for election but on lower rates, no rate increases. Only do that if the majority votes. So everything's about the majority.
Is there any particular type of person you need to nominate, or is it just French person?
Yeah, they have to be enrolled for the area that you want to stand for. So if you're doing some homework beforehand, go to the council office, check whether your nominators are in the area that you're want to stand for. Rather than that, no, they can be family members. In the old days, there used to be some credence put on.
Yeah, so I wondered if it was like, like your passport.
Yeah. No, yeah. So basically, so long as they are on the roll and they have the entitlement to vote for that particular issue.
And if you are running, can you nominate someone?
You can nominate somebody else, yes. You can't nominate yourself.
No.
Anthony, can I ask the question in a slightly different way for this gentleman? Does the identity of the nominators, it's on the nomination form, does it get publicised anywhere else? It's only people who actually go to the website for the reading?
Yeah, that's right. It's up to those nomination documents are a point of public inspection.
Yes, but
So the media could go in and,
it's not publicised.
well, I don't know, does Invercargill City do that?
We put it on the website, but we don't.
Who the nominators are?
Occasionally the media will pick it up. They did in 2013 elections, but not, sorry, 2016, but not the 2019.
Yeah, so they are on the website, it's the full front page of the document goes up, but we don't publicise in any way that it's all, it's there. And the only time we don't publicise is if we receive requests.
Okay. It's a bit of a horses for courses, so some councils will do this. Yeah. The councils further north typically just put the nomination, the confirmed candidates up. They don't broadcast the nominator details, but it's just to be aware that in this council's case, they will.
It's a public document.
Yes. Yeah. But the media might pick it up and make a story out of it.
But
But going back to your original question, yes, as a candidate, you can nominate somebody else. Sometimes it's not in your best interest. But it's not stop you doing it.
And also just be mindful if you've got your nominator and they're on the unpublished roll, their details will be published as part of that nomination form going on the website. So it's just something to think about when you're asking your nominators. Just make sure they are happy for that if they are on the unpublished roll.
Right. Anybody else got any queries? All right.
So I want to close, Anthony, by saying it may be a bureaucratic process to be nominated and to put your form in and to comply with the expenses. I think that 95% of the people who stand who are elected discover that it's the most interesting, complex, challenging, rewarding thing they can do. And I would really encourage you, again, if there's any questions after this, talk to your current elected members. Many councils have had a period where they haven't worked so well together, but actually it's up to the people who stand and are elected to make that work. And it really is a wonderful part of many people's lives that they've enjoyed contributing to their community. So I really would encourage you.
Thanks. And I would just endorse those final comments, both in the community and then in the wider sense with Amy's team at the region. So it's been going to that regional level. So with that, I would say thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your attendance tonight. Please take a handbook, deluxe hard copy edition. We've also got some for the regional council in case you're interested. If you've got specific questions, feel free to stay and have a chat, or fire them through. Our contact details are in the book, or you can ring and find us online, or ring our call centre. That goes for the region as well. And if you've got something specific for SDC, we have Robin Ralph here, as the Deputy Electoral Officer, and she is able to answer any questions specific to the District Council that you may have, because they have a different structure for their elections to us, just in terms of how you can vote. So outside of that, thank you, and good night.